program called Sneak. And what it was doing without staff knowing was it basically takes a photo of you every few minutes, but it's irregularly timed. And so, and it sends these pictures of all the staff members to a central manager who monitors the workforce working from home. So, like, it's
positively Orwellian.
Yeah, no, it really is.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast demystifying the big economic issues in Australia and putting them in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Institute, and at the time of recording this, on Tuesday, the 5th of May 2020, The Guardian is reporting that Australia has 980 active cases of COVID-19, 5,770 recovered cases, and a sad 96 deaths. But things may have changed since recording. And for at least a month now, anyone who's able to has been working from home if they can, including everyone at the Australia Institute.
Life is changing in Australia as it is changing all around the world.
Australians are working out how best to work from home as those fortunate to be employed
Well, more and more people are being asked to work from home or telecommute.
Working from home and remotely. But nonetheless, we've had to adapt.
Any other workday, get out of your pyjamas and get dressed, create a dedicated workspace.
Excuse the casual attire. Can be a messy business putting toddlers to bed, so I'm not in my work clothes, so forgive me for that. I do just want to prepare.
This is a glimpse into my work from home life with my two babies. Hi. In the space where I'm doing a lot of my...
66 was our high temperature. No. You gotta be quiet while Daddy's talking. Okay.
Technology kills viruses in just one... What did you do, Mom? Dad! Holy crap!
I'm getting some quite bad feedback here.
She's long dreamed of fostering a cat. And she thinks now is as good a time as any.
And working from home really has a great potential to cushion the economic blow of this pandemic, allowing many to keep working and earning an income, and many firms and industries to continue at least partial production. But there are also many challenges and risks associated with this major shift in work patterns. So to unpack the implications for all of us, today I'm talking to the author of the Australia Institute's Centre for Future Work report on the subject, senior economist Alison Pennington. G'day, Alison.
G'day, Ebony.
Firstly, I was going to ask you, what kind of numbers are we talking about here? How many people in Australia can actually work from home realistically?
So we know before the pandemic, research showed about 10 to 20% of people were already doing some of their work at home because the advent of all these new technologies, like first of all computers, but increasing communication devices, meant that there was already a trend towards this more flexible work. And what we've found is that the pandemic has basically dropped a bomb and shocked these trends into overdrive. And so our research finds that around 4 million people across the workforce could be potentially working from home once all adjustments have been made. So that's about 30% of the workforce. But we predict probably about 15% of all workers, so 2 million people, are currently sitting behind their laptops, waking up in the morning, having their coffee, hopefully getting dressed as well, and arming themselves with their Wi-Fi connections and continuing to keep the cogs turning.
And so what kind of jobs are we talking about here?
People who can work from home are typically professionals, managers, administrative and clerical workers, basically anyone who can perform their jobs with computers. But also there are some other characteristics of people who work from home, that they generally have more agency in their jobs. And they have more independence. They can control their hours more than other workers. And they're also generally higher paid, which is one particular interesting and important piece of factoid coming out of our research, because it has all these implications for inequality.
And so if these types of jobs and the people doing them do tend to be slightly higher paid and more in control of their working conditions, is the expectation that this is going to make inequality worse?
Absolutely. I think that it's opening up all these new fault lines of inequality, which cut by whether it is that you can work from home or not. But then you've got gender in there, and then also types of jobs, because of course not everyone is in a position where they can actually control their hours and have, you know, agency over their hours. And there's some real horrendous stories coming out of very large, reputable employers like the consultancy firms, Deloitte sending all of their workers home and saying, hey, basically work your butts off because we're making redundancies. And if we don't see an acceptable productivity rate, then your head's on the chopping block. And so those sorts of practices we think can be happening and are happening for people who are working from home. But then those people who, you know, don't wake up in the morning and open up their laptops and get to work, but actually turn out every day in their millions. And there are so many more of these workers, and they are the essential workers who are not just keeping the cogs turning, but they're also keeping us all safe. And we have some real concerns about the differences of their access to things like paid sick leave. It's just the most important tool we need in our industrialization system now to not only provide safety and security to these people and their health, but also it's such an important public health policy. There's no way that we're going to be able to manage anything close to some sort of reopening of the economy without this tool, without the ability of people to isolate themselves, without the risk of losing all their incomes. And that's just one entitlement that people who don't work from home are less likely to have. So what we think is happening is that this new work from home regime is going to be compounding income inequality, but likely health inequality. Health outcomes are going to differ. And potentially gender inequality too, if this the increased caring burden is placed unfairly just on women workers who then face income losses. So you can see that the regime, it's not straightforward, but it opens up all these new fault lines and concerns.
Yeah. Before we move on to some of the risks associated with this shift to working from home, the types of jobs that you're talking about that can't be done from home are things like anyone kind of working for Coles and Woolies. We've got obviously healthcare workers, aged care workers, teachers. These are all the types of jobs that, you know, require people to be present at their workplace.
Yeah, so healthcare workers, like you said, teachers, transport workers, because essential healthcare workers and all essential workers need to get to the workplace. And so all of our transit systems are still functioning. Then you've got cleaners who have just been catapulted from this position of, you know, being seen as lower quality work, low skill, and not deserving of decent wages and protections, and quite often a migrant heavy workforce, which is typical of when an industrialization system allows work to fall by the wayside. It's often migrants who end up having to fill those low wage jobs, and these people they're turning out every day. They also they're outside of those essential workers. You have people who can't immediately do their jobs from home, and that's like logistics workers, people in trades or technicians,
tradespeople,
labourers, machinery operators. And a lot of these people are still doing their jobs through like logistics networks that are getting food to supermarkets and things like that. But there's likely a lot of these workers have been furloughed by the new JobKeeper subsidy. So you can see as well, if these people get to sort of keep their spot in the labour market, they receive the JobKeeper subsidy, but there could be people working in our supermarkets right now who are earning less than that subsidy. So there's quite a lot of distortions that have come out by what we would say is the poorly designed JobKeeper scheme.
Alison, what are some of the risks that we should be expecting and trying to avoid with this shift to working from home? I'm thinking here of things like a stand for your laptop and headphones for Zoom meetings and all of those kinds of things. What are some of the risks and challenges of this shift?
So we could say that there are two ways that this is happening and could continue to happen. Employers could be constructive, could have more of a realistic approach and recognise that there is inevitably a lot of stress and disruption to people's lives now. And they can support those employees to make sure that they have all the right setup in the home that meets work health safety standards, because the employers are still liable for those standards, and ensure that there are some adjustments being made to working hours that actually fit into people's schedules and their lives, particularly for working parents who now have little ones running around the house and maybe they're overseeing their learning as well. And we could have that more, realistic and constructive approach, or we could see employers take this baptism by fire. There's more tightening of discipline and basically taking this shock to our system as an opportunity to intensify the work regime. And so we're seeing both of those things happening. We can't rely on individual employers to do the right thing, right? This is why we have policy. Policy is important because it sets up the rules and the settings for all the actors in an economy and how they function. And this is so important in the industrial relations space because some of the risks that are quite clearly coming out of millions of people now working in the home is, think about things like the massive cost shift that could be occurring if employees are not subsidised or at least assisted with the cost of setting up a workplace at home. And then you have all of your ongoing costs like utilities, your rent or your space in itself, printing, data charges. These are all costs that are typically covered by the employer in a formal fixed workplace. And all those costs are shifting onto employees. And we don't think that there are necessarily the structures to support some kind of reimbursement of those costs. A tax return at the end of the year isn't sufficient. So we think some sort of work from home allowance is a good approach. Then you have the issues of work health safety, and most clearly as a huge concern to me, and I've been reading a lot about how stretched our domestic violence services have been. But, working from home isn't a novelty for thousands of people who being in the home, it's not necessarily a safe place. So what does this mean for those who being in the formal workplace was actually a way to create some distance from unsafe conditions in the home? So we would say, obviously, that shows the importance of domestic violence leave, but maybe we need to look into other supports like compensation and support with finding housing, particular community services supports and domestic violence supports for anyone who needs to actually relocate in this time. And you mentioned this idea of intensifying, and that made me think automatically of working hours and being online all the time. And even before the pandemic, being able to have your email on your phone, for example, does mean that you're more available to your work. And there is kind of an underlying expectation that you'll respond to emails outside of hours and things. Is that another risk that we're seeing? Yeah, absolutely. We already know that the introduction of smartphones and being on hand 24/7 was bleeding into personal lives, and people have been finding it much harder to create those divisions. There is definitely the risk of people now working in the home co-locating both their personal and public lives essentially in the same place, that it just intensifies that bleed. And there are a lot of risks that come from being overworked. And actually, contrary to this common narrative that people working from home are more likely to be lazy, or the novelty of, working in your PJs and, watching Netflix. And actually a lot of at least some of the research coming out internationally on this work from home arrangement is that people's working hours are pushing way out. They're actually working, I think in the US, they're finding people working around 2 hours more than they would be in a standard workday. So this is why there needs to be really, really strong protections and rules around working hours and people being respected for being able to shut off at a certain time, and their overtime being compensated for is one of the clearest ways that employers can be slogged, basically, if they continue to increase the workload of someone beyond their standard working hours. And the other thing I was going to ask about is monitoring and surveillance. So partly this has come up, I think, through the
public conversation about the COVID Safe app and concerns that, you know, people have about tracking of location and sharing privacy and data. But in a workspace, being able to monitor whether or not workers are on the job, so to speak, is that a big concern as well?
Previous research that the Centre for Future Work did before the crisis was on the increasing and worrying rise of digital surveillance and electronic monitoring in workplaces. And we found that 70% of respondents to the survey said that there was some form of digital surveillance or electronic monitoring happening in their workplace. So then your thinking then goes, all right, well, now those people who were previously in an office, what's happened to those programs? And without a doubt, there's a real risk that all of those programs, which do things like measure your keystrokes, like how rapid they are, or how quickly you're moving in between tabs, the scrolling of your mouse, or even...
It's positively Orwellian.
Yeah, no, it really is. But basically the protections in Australian law for people against these sorts of Orwellian software programs is really piecemeal. Like, it's very patchy across states and the Commonwealth. And so those software programs could be following people into the home right now. And there was this horrid story that came from the US of the rise of this program called Sneak. And what it was doing without staff knowing was it basically takes a photo of you every few minutes, but it's irregularly timed. And so, and it sends these pictures of all the staff members to a central manager who monitors the workforce working from home. So, like, it's just, this is where we say this could open up a world of flexibility and a better quality working and personal life, or it could become an opportunity for employers to put the boot down and squeeze people and monitor them, and which of course is just silly because it's terrible for productivity and for the morale of your workforce. It would just make no sense. But the drive to do that is so high.
And what are some of the benefits that we will see from this shift? So obviously flexibility is a key one, but what are some of the positive outcomes that there might be for workers from the increased ability to work from home?
Well, there's silver linings around the place for sure. And looking at, for instance, the very gendered nature of how unpaid work is done in the home, which impacts, the working lives of both men and women, but the family lives and the basic how families function themselves. And one of the silver linings could be that, given that as fathers, as one cohort in the labour market, are actually the most likely to be working the longest hours. So it's possible that this huge shift, which has seen fathers often in managerial and professional roles, who are more likely to be in these full-time kind of long hours jobs, are now in the home, and it's providing opportunities for potentially a reweighting of the unequal care patterns that we had coming into the crisis. But there are obviously also risks that this work is falling increasingly onto women. So it's one area that we could say, like so many areas of this crisis, is you can see that the world opens up and you can see how we could reframe our family, taxation, work policies in a way that actually build on a good thing. But there's just so much we need to do to make it a good thing. Yeah. So that's definitely a silver lining. And there are, of course, so many positive stories coming out about the ability of people to save time from the commute, being able to develop hobbies, or at least bring their blood pressure down a few notches. That's certainly my case. I feel like I'm getting more done because I'm just not running around as much.
Yeah.
I think for family life and overall quality and well-being and, the work-life balance, there's lots of opportunities here for people as well.
I definitely have enjoyed being able to work in my tracksuit pants for sure. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go back to skinny jeans and professional attire when it comes time to get back into the office.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm the same. I don't think there's been a day that I haven't pulled on track pants and been like, yeah, I'm sick of this. Like, every day I'm like, this is the best.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Alison.
Cheers, thank you.
And this has been a special episode of Follow the Money, and we're aiming to bring you shorter but more frequent episodes during the pandemic, so please make sure that you stay subscribed. You can check out the Australia Institute's Economics of a Pandemic webinar series at tai.org.au/webinars. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, our next webinar is a virtual politics in the pub with Guardian Australia political reporter Amy Ramikis and news.com.au political editor Samantha Maiden. And on Friday at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, we'll be talking to Professor Ross Garneau about the opportunity for renewably powered manufacturing in Australia. And you can sign up for those webinars on our website at tai.org.au. For the latest health information, you can check health.gov.au or listen to the ABC's excellent CoronaCast podcast, which comes out daily. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, May the 5th, 2020, and things may have changed since recording. You can visit the Centre for Future Work at futurework.org.au for all their latest research and content, including Alison's research paper on working from home. We're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS, and the Centre for Future Work is at CNTR Future Work. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a _N_T. Alison Pennington is at AK_Pennington with a _N. This episode was produced by Jennifer Macey with production help from Lucy Law, Hayley Wilkinson and Jack Wallner. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeat from Pulse and Thrum. And please stay at home if you can, keep washing those hands, and thanks for listening.